Donald Trump looks certain to be acquitted. Republican senators have blocked witnesses in the U.S. president's impeachment. So as this trial nears its end, will Democrats still pursue Trump's removal? And what does it mean for his re-election bid? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Adrian Finighan. The third impeachment trial of a sitting U.S. president will likely come to an end on Wednesday after the Senate voted to block any witnesses testifying. This puts Donald Trump a step closer to being acquitted, given the Republican majority in the upper house of the U.S. Congress. The trial resumes for closing arguments on Monday, but the vote has been pushed to Wednesday, the day after Trump's annual State of the Union address. Al Jazeera's Heidi Jo Castro reports from Washington.
Democrats say the impeachment trial of President Donald Trump is the first trial in U.S. history without witnesses.
Is this a fair trial? Without the ability to call witnesses and produce documents, the answer is clearly and unequivocally no.
But despite hours of arguments trying to convince Republican senators to allow new witnesses in the trial,
the yeas are 49, the nays are 51.
The Democrats lost. All but two Republican senators voted no.
It's a grand tragedy. America will remember this day, unfortunately, where the Senate did not live up to its responsibilities, where the Senate turned away from truth and went along with a sham trial.
Democrats had hoped to get the support of moderate Republican Lisa Murkowski, but in the end, she rejected the idea, saying in a statement, "I have come to the conclusion that there will be no fair trial in the Senate. I don't believe the continuation of this process will change anything. It is sad for me to admit that, as an institution, the Congress has failed." This means the Senate jury has essentially sealed its ears to John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor. In his soon-to-be-released book, Bolton reportedly says Trump asked him to help pressure Ukraine for dirt on political opponents and tied U.S. security aid to the request. Trump has denied the reports. His attorneys argue, even if true, Trump should still not be impeached.
So this idea that they haven't had witnesses, that's the smokescreen. You've heard from a lot of witnesses. The problem with the case, the problem with their position is, even with all of those witnesses, it doesn't prove up an impeachable offense. The articles fail.
The impeachment trial now nears its end with Trump's acquittal all but certain, given that Republicans hold the majority. Trump's political fate more likely lies in the hands of American voters who will decide in November whether to give him a second term. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, shortly after the vote in the Senate, the U.S. president took to Twitter and said, no matter what you give to the Democrats, in the end, they will never be satisfied. In the House, they gave us nothing. Right, let's bring in our guests who today are all in Washington, D.C. with us. We have Jack Kingston, a former Republican congressman from Georgia, Laura Brown, director of the Graduate School of Political Management at George Washington University, and Alan Barron, a former special impeachment counsel to the House of Representatives and a former minority chief counsel to the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee. Welcome to you all. Alan Barron, let's start with you. So on Wednesday, President Trump all but certain to be acquitted when even Republican senators admit that he's guilty, albeit of, quote, wrong and inappropriate actions, according to Senator Rob Portman. What's your take on what happened on Friday and indeed the whole trial?
Well, I would start with the fact that I believe that the procedural aspects of this so-called trial, it's a farce. No witnesses, no documentary evidence, and yet we call it a trial. No, it wasn't a trial. It was a sham proceeding designed to just get through it and endorse Mr. Trump's behavior. From a substantive point of view, what Trump did is far worse than any president has ever done. I mean, compared to the Clinton his affair with Monica Lewinsky is certainly not to his credit, but hardly jeopardized any American policy. Here you have Trump overruling the decision by the Congress to make these arms available to an ally fighting the Russians, and he holds it up so that he can get some personal political benefit. That's terrible, and he's going to get away with it.
Laura Brown, what do you make of Republican senators who appear to prepare to trivialize the president's actions as merely inappropriate, not enough to warrant removing a president from office?
Well, it seems as though Republican senators, at least most of them, are quite willing to go off the cliff with this president into the election. I think when you look at the political ramifications of this, for especially those senators who are up for re-election and in battleground states, like Senator Cory Gardner or Senator Martha McSally, it is a very fraught decision. They are likely to lose their elections, given where the current trends in their states are, and yet they seem more than willing to lose with the Republicans, with this president's sort of wrongdoing and acknowledging that, than they are willing to lose with a clear conscience. And that suggests really a problem for the rest of their life in terms of their character being questioned. They become very bad spokespeople for any interest that they would care to represent.
Jack Kingston, the trial was a farce designed to endorse the president's behavior. Was it a fair trial?
Absolutely not in the House. When you think about the due process that was denied the President of the United States, Alan knows, and Alan knows very well, that both Clinton and Nixon had the right to cross-examine their accusers. They had the right to subpoena witnesses on both sides of the aisle. That was denied in the House. In fact, most of the investigation was done by the Intel Committee in the basement of the Capitol behind shut doors. Most members of the House did not have the right to be in the room, nor did the president have the ability to have counsel. Nonetheless, we heard from the Democrats, we have overwhelming evidence. This case is very clear, very easy. And then what do? They get in the Senate and they start belly aching with a loser's limp. Oh, we need more witnesses. Well, if the case was so iron tight, why in the world would they need witnesses? I mean, it would be obvious. And I'll predict this, that Joe Manchin and Doug Jones, Democrat senators from West Virginia and Alabama, I bet you that they vote against at least one of these articles. So you'll have in the Senate, just like you did in the House, a bipartisan vote. But the bipartisanship is against this sham trial, this political lynching that the Democrats have perpetuated on the President of the United States, and they all should be ashamed of themselves.
I note, Jack, that the Washington Post quotes you today as saying that you once had your reservations about President Trump, but have become an ardent admirer. Alan, what do you make of what you just heard? Democrats should be ashamed of themselves.
I am a Democrat. I respectfully disagree. I'm not ashamed at all. I think the Republicans who just joined in lockstep behind this, what I perceive as an outlaw president, who knows no bounds to what he wants to do and what he feels he can do, this is very disturbing, very disturbing. I think he now can consort with foreign officials and, in a sense, blackmail them into supporting his candidacy for presidency in 2020. He can withhold, in his view, evidence that the House wanted to get for its impeachment inquiry. He ordered them not to do it. A few brave souls violated his order not to do it, and so they showed up to testify. But Trump was ordering all of the various agencies not to turn over any documents. That is an outlaw president, and he should have been impeached and convicted, and shame on the Republicans for lining up behind him the way they did.
Laura, do you want to come in on that?
I would. I mean, I think what I'd really like to address is the idea that the House proceeding was unfair or in some way biased. The reality is this: in both the Clinton impeachment trial and in the Nixon case, where he eventually resigned, there were prior investigations that was done into the wrongdoing. That is not the case here. What we saw was that the Attorney General, Bob Barr, basically rejected the whistleblower's claim, rejected that there was anything wrong here, decided not to open an investigation into the call with Zelensky, and essentially shut it down. This was in the national interest. I'm very sorry, but when you're talking about holding up aid to an ally, that is in the national interest. This is not about President Trump being willing to have his own election just codified by a foreign entity.
Jack, what Republican senators have essentially said is that they're okay with foreign interference in US elections, and it's okay if our president bends the rules for his own and our political gain, haven't they?
Are you saying the Democrats said that when they endorsed Hillary Clinton in a made-up dossier and had no interest in connecting the dots between the Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC, and the phony dossier, and people like Alexandra Chalupa, who admitted she was working for DNC and working with the Ukrainian government to dig up dirt on Donald J. Trump? So, you know, I think we need to just look at the facts here. What we do know
Jack, I
is
do
the
think you need to look at the facts.
Unlike Clinton,
Yeah. Go on.
okay.
Yeah.
Let me finish, Professor.
Yeah,
Jack,
let me finish.
Hillary Clinton is not president.
Professor. Therefore she can break the law. You are right. I understand where you're coming from, but here's what we do know: 17 witnesses, one fact witness. Alan will appreciate this. One fact witness, and he admitted that it was his projection that there was a quid pro quo. And when he actually talked to the president about it, and this is the congressional record, I'm not making this up, you can check, he said, the president said, I don't want anything, there is no connection. And of the 16 other witnesses, they all said there was no connection. And by the way, Javelin missiles did go through. The presidents do hold up aid from time to time. The impeachment manager, Democrat Crow, said he only did it for Ukraine. Another lie. He actually did it for South Korea, Afghanistan, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. This president is not alone in thinking that there's corruption in Ukraine. Fiona Hill said the same thing, said the president was not alone. That's almost a direct quote, by the way. So the House did not prove the case because there was nothing to prove. The Senate's job is not to investigate, it's to deliberate. They deliberated and they said there's nothing there. And that's why I'm saying there will be a bipartisan vote when the Democrats join the Republicans and say, no, actually there was no abuse of Congress.
Okay, Laura.
Well, I just say very simply that, in fact, solicitation of a foreign entity or government for help in a campaign is against the law. It exists already as a prohibition in our campaigning statutes. Yes. No, but the problem is that the president, in fact, asked for help. So when the president asked for help and asked for something of value, that is, in fact, against the law.
Okay, it is, Laura, but the president did not do that, and we've just had 17 witnesses who just about said that they did not. That's what the call summary shows. And their partisanship.
That the president did.
Let me ask you a question. Well, your wrath should be at Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff for not going through the due process to subpoena witnesses and getting people there that could have changed this case, instead of rushing it through the House so they could get home for Christmas break or whatever, and then having the humiliation of Nancy Pelosi sitting on the articles for 30 days, even though there was this big rush. She sat on the articles for 30 days. 30 days that could have been used so that your party could have subpoenaed witnesses and getting people like John Bolton in there. Now, we were denied the ability to cross-examine the whistleblower, people like Alexandra Chalupa, Hunter Biden, and Adam Schiff himself. But if you wanted to open it up, that's what would have happened in the Senate. And I know part of the tactic here is 100% political, that the Democrats have wanted to drag this out throughout the year because you can't beat Donald Trump with your socialist candidates that you're running in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, and all the primaries.
All right. Laura, give me a quick response to that, and then we'll have to move on and bring in Alan, who's waiting patiently.
So my quick response is, first of all, I have actually voted on both sides of the aisle, and I do not consider myself solely adherent to any political party. Secondly, I think one of the things that's important to say is that we have a president who has been lawless. And if my wrath is at this administration, it is because, as Gordon Sondland said, everybody was in the loop, including the president's White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, and this appears to be a bigger problem than anyone on the Republican side wants to admit, is the level of collusion and corruption that is supporting an outlaw president.
Alan, regardless of whether he's guilty or not, there will always be, won't there, a whiff of impropriety hanging over this president from now on. I mean, he's wearing it as a badge of honor, but how will history judge him, do you think?
This is a terrible period in American political history. Trump is an outlaw president. He's a liar. I mean, that has been documented something like 16,000 times. He's a disgrace. He is a disgrace. The only thing I think that is keeping him in office or got him into office, he has this hardcore of about 35% of the voters. And so far, at least, the economy's doing well, probably due to nothing having anything to do by policies of this administration. I just think history will judge him harshly, and it will judge the Republican Party harshly for having gotten into lockstep behind him.
Alan, could he be impeached again between now and the election? I mean, we're arguing here about what we know has happened. What don't we know has happened?
In theory, he could be. I don't know that the country or the House is prepared once again to gear up to do this, but there's nothing in theory that would preclude it. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think what you will see between now and November is a very aggressive Democratic Party hammering away at what the Republicans would not let the public, 75% of whom said that they wanted to hear more evidence, real evidence. I think the Democrats will hammer away at that throughout the rest of the year, and I think the Republicans should pay a price at the polls.
Jack, by acquitting the president, to what extent have Republicans taken ownership of the president's actions? Is the party ready and willing to take responsibility for whatever the president happens to do next?
I think that the Republicans are happy to say, you know what, we're part of the greatest economy America has seen, lowest unemployment, historically low unemployment rates among African Americans, women, Hispanics, frankly, every demographic. They'll take credit for the building the trade agreements that we have had, the prosperity, the peace through strength that the president is initiating. The president, it's a very dicey world today, we all know that, but the president has done a very good job in the Middle East and with North Korea and strengthen our relationships with allies. NATO is now paying more of their fair share that they should be doing.
You say, you say that he's done a good job in the Middle East and South Korea. The negotiations with North Korea, rather, the North Korean negotiations have gone nowhere. What has he done in the Middle East?
Here's what we heard from the Democrats. Well, what he's done in the Middle East, let's look at it under President Obama and the mess that he inherited. What the president's trying to do is say, you know, we can't be there forever. We can have a presence, we can have military assistance, but we do not need to own the Middle East. And I think that most people in the Middle East are saying, you know what, we do want to be allies with you, but we want to run our own countries. And so I think it was time for us to re-examine our policies over there. But we have not had the terrorism that we could have had and the terrorism that has been predicted. Again, let me say this: the world's a very dicey place these days.
But it's always
been
Jack, it's always been a dicey place.
Adrian, when he was elected, and we've heard over and over again,
credit for that?
He's going to.
Alan, go on.
Well, okay. Number one, remember that your president, Mr. Obama. Did you want me to answer the question?
No.
Remember, Obama sent blankets and MREs to Ukraine. We sent Javelin missiles to the Ukraine. North Korea, we've engaged in them, and you haven't.
Jack, I don't want to go down a whole other avenue here, but just briefly, Alan wanted to make a point there. Alan?
Yes, I mean, I don't think he can take much credit for the economy. If presidents could run the economy, we never have a recession. It doesn't work that way.
Well, I am an
we just
I
have a
actually have a
different
degree
view.
in economics, and I can tell you when you reduce the regulatory burdens on businesses that are killing job creation, you do help the economy.
Right.
Regulatory uncertainty
That was what we
kills
used to
job
call
creation.
voodoo
You know that,
economics,
Alan.
which has been discredited for generations.
Oh, you mean the Reagan prosperity followed by now the Trump prosperity? Come on,
Okay.
Alan. Listen.
Look.
I'm going to admit to you that the president isn't always a Boy Scout, and when he says things, as you probably will with me when Barack Obama said your health care is going to be dropped by $2,500 per family, and you can keep your own doctor. I mean, presidents say things. We'll all admit that.
All right.
But
Okay, look.
just remember this: when you were sitting in the chamber under Clinton, he got to have witnesses examinated, and Donald Trump was not given that option. And you do know that to be true, Alan.
Laura, the president isn't always a Boy Scout. He's due to give the State of the Union address on Tuesday before the verdict in this trial. How do you think he's going to behave in that chamber?
Well, I think it's very telling that the Republicans, including Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, ensured that this acquittal would actually not occur prior to the State of the Union. I think it is clear that the Senate is wanting the president to have some restraint on him when he goes into the body of the House chamber and makes that speech. They are, I think, as worried about what the president's future behavior will be as his past behavior. And I think what we know from how the president has been for the last 3 years is that he believes he is not accountable for anything, and he doesn't regret or is sorry about anything. So as a result, I predict, and I will stand by this, that there is sure to be more wrongdoing and abuse between now and the election, and all Republicans who acquitted this president will own that as their responsibility because they kept him in office. They allowed his character, which is severely flawed, to remain there, and they propped him up as a ridiculous leader.
And Alan, given that, if what Laura says is correct, how will this impeachment trial affect both the Democrats and the Republicans when it comes to the election?
Well, I think the Democrats will cry foul that this is a lawless president. He's gotten away with it because the Republicans just got into lockstep behind him and enabled him to get away with it. And I think Laura's right. What we see between now and the election, it will be Trump unleashed. And that is a scary prospect. I think that the Republicans, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. I mean, they're going to try to make it look better. They're not going to want to acknowledge how out of control he really is and try to sell it to the American public. I hope it doesn't work.
Jack, is the president, very briefly, is the president destined for a second term?
I think he is. I think you're seeing weak Democrat candidates. You can't win an election based solely on hate and socialism and, hi, aren't we college sophomores? We want free stuff. You have to have more substance. And when you're running against an economy that's one of the strongest economies America's ever seen, even the world is looking at it with a lot of envy right now. You're looking at peace through strength. You're looking at a president who has good coalitions between evangelical Christians, between military families, between farm families, between working people. He's got popularity with Hispanics and blacks that scared the Democrats to death. That's why they always have to pull out the race card. Okay. He's going to get reelected. And by the way, I want to say this. Anybody who can say how
very quickly, Jack, we're out of time.
Play in every single House district, you can't predict impeachment in the House district. We couldn't do it when we impeached President Clinton, and the Democrats can't do it now that they've impeached President Trump. You just can't. Things are too fluid.
I'm afraid we've got to leave it. Many thanks indeed to you all, Jack Kingston, Laura Brown, and Alan Barron. Thank you for watching. Don't forget you can see this program at any time just by going to the website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, join us on our Facebook page. You'll find that at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle at AJ Inside Story from me, Adrian Finighan, and the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again. Bye for now.